Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Just Friends. As always, I'm your host, Mitchell Embry. So I mentioned earlier this month, or maybe it was last month, that I had a bunch of unused material from some of my earlier conversations back before I realized that things might work better as two-parters. And I posted a poll asking what you guys wanted me to do with it, and the general consensus was just release it. So that's what I decided to do. So this is some of the unreleased material that I got from my very first conversation with Jake Stratton. There's some really good stories in here, and I'm glad that it's not going to wind up in the trash can. So I hope you enjoy listening to it. Let's check it out. You probably don't realize this, but like I said, I looked up to you when we were growing up.
That was a terrible idea.
But also, you engage with me in a way that I really appreciate and that I don't get sometimes from other friends. Whereas you're ready to talk to me about stuff that's difficult to talk about and in a meaningful way. And sometimes when I have conversations with you, I leave feeling like I learned something about something. Myself maybe, or my perspective is different, or I understand something about you that's intimate and I just appreciate that about you now. And so I don't know. So with the podcast with Chris, I love Chris. He's a great friend, but sometimes I feel myself falling into a role where like I'm just trying to entertain Chris. And that's not a bad thing, but that's just who I feel myself becoming when I'm with him. But I think I appreciate you a lot because who I feel myself become when I interact with you is a person who's able to be more vulnerable. I feel like I can talk to you about difficult things and I can appreciate what you're going to have to say about it. And that's kind of what I want this podcast to kind of feel like, is like an intimate exploration of who we are as friends. And it's hard to do that with some people, but I feel excited about the next 3 people who are going to be on the podcast. You, so you're now.
Yes.
Casey, who also is willing to go to that place because Casey has got trauma.
Yeah. And that's, I think it's kind of interesting. Like when I met Casey in 6th grade, and for you all that don't know on the podcast, he's before even like a year ago, he was like, he was my brother. And now he's legally my brother.
Yes.
So we get to hang out. We get to hang out every holiday. We get to,
So you'll see him tomorrow.
I will see him tomorrow.
I'm only not jealous because I'm going to see his ass Friday. Shout out to Casey Ford.
Yeah.
You've probably already talked to me when you're hearing this, but who cares?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, there are so many like connections that we have with our friends, and it's just like there are so many bonds, and some of those bonds are like related trauma.
Yeah.
And that they say that, like in like war, right? So if you have a group of people and they go through a traumatic experience together, they have an incredibly strong bond. And I do feel like because we can all sort of relate to some level of trauma, that does as part of our bond.
Yeah. I can talk about my dad's alcoholism with you and with Casey because you totally understand what I mean when I talk about it. I went to man camp recently and I hung out with a bunch of people whom I really enjoy and whom I really love, who have the same jobs as my dad, and they're doing a lot of the same things as my dad. And they were like, "You're the son of a rod buster. What can we do differently so that we don't fuck up our kids?" And I was like, well, I was just thinking, like, based on this experience,
don't do what you're doing.
Don't do what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
But not really. Not really, because what they were doing right then was meeting me where they were and asking me those questions, like, how can I grow and how can I get better?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too, is like, and it's not easy to know, or it's impossible to know. Like, you can't go back and be like, hey, Dad, were you having those same conversations with other people? I mean, the fact that our friends are asking
Exactly.
for that, it means that they're willing to do something about it.
Exactly.
And I think that's a huge step.
And I want to point out that earlier I talked about how I don't necessarily believe fully in free will. You can only make the decisions that are available to you, and you make the best decisions that you can based on the programs that you're running. Yeah. I'm going to interact with this substance that I know is negative for me because it allows me to work in a way that lets me provide for my family, and that is a huge thing that I value. So I get it. That was my dad's thing. He did drugs that helped him work more so he could work harder so he could make more money. And that's why my family was comfortable.
Yeah.
Not because he was super well educated, because he was a hard ass worker.
Yeah.
Same thing in this situation. So like, I don't judge him.
Yeah.
And I love him.
And even especially like given your thoughts and theories on like free will. And I do kind of, agree with that. I think that there are things, and I mean, I guess this does exist outside the realm of free will, when people are exposed to external like stimulus, like, whether it's someone being an advocate and speaking up against something or for something, like that to me is where free will kind of, it's like, had that thing not been there, then maybe this person would continue down this path. But because of this stimulus, they are now choosing a path different than the one they were set on.
And I would even expand upon that, because I don't fully disbelieve in free will. You have control of your ship, but you don't have instant transmission. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You can't become, unless you have a very specific set of circumstances laid out in front of you, you can't go from being nothing to something all the time.
Right.
But at the same time, I think you have control in very small capacities over the direction that your ship's going in. It's like you're driving a very huge ship. You have very little control, but you have some. You can you can make small incremental changes over time and improve yourself as a person.
And those changes may affect the changes that, if you have kids or other people that you're interacting with, to kind of pull them in a more positive direction, help change some of their things, which gives ultimately, I think, a little bit more control. And
to bring this back to what we were originally talking about, like, because I feel that way, because that's my ultimate philosophy on life, and I'm applying that to myself and trying to grow and trying to become a better person, and realizing that where I started sets me back, and that sucks. I don't feel judgment towards a person who started in a different spot or who is starting in a different spot. So I guess my point is, I don't want to make any of my friends feel bad for where they're at. I just want to empower them to try to be moving forward and to just, and know that I love them. And like you were kind of saying, that's what I want this podcast to be, is a positive force in the lives of my friends.
Yeah. And I guess one thing I would like to say is, like, do you feel that, like, where we were, just, I mean, even just like thinking socioeconomically, like, that to me is almost the best. But I would not choose to have been anywhere else than where I was.
Really?
I would not have liked to been born into like huge wealth, and I would not obviously choose. I don't think you'll find a lot of people will be like, yeah, I would love to be dirt poor.
Yeah,
no. That'd be awesome. Could I just start with nothing?
But you can admit that it's a spectrum, right?
Yeah, it's a spectrum. So like in that spectrum, I feel like we have been very fortunate to be in that spectrum and
to be where we are in that spectrum.
Yeah.
Let me put this in there. My wife, not much further up the spectrum than us. Yeah, her parents made more money than my parents, but the thing that really is the difference is not the money. It's who they were as people. And who they were as people is the reason why they had a little bit more money. They were healthier, mentally healthier. Man, I'm probably going to have to edit this out because it makes my parents seem sucky. They weren't addicts. They weren't addicted to anything. They had healthy patterns of behavior. Yeah. Because the point I was going to make is that Sarah is super capable and super competent, and I wish I was that way.
But I was going to say, but doesn't the fact that you're wanting change and you're craving change, and I know she does too. She's like, seems like she's really gung-ho about, living life to the fullest and having these experiences, which is fantastic.
She's wise in the sense that she knows that, and she's taught me.
And she's like 4 or 5 years young. Like all of our wives, other than my wife, I forget that they're like 5 years younger than us. And it does, obviously it's not weird, but it's just like, I forget that I'll make some reference and they'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like,
no, but she's taught me and she's changed my perspective a whole lot, because you're talking about financial freedom. You're talking about, you realize now that you've reached a level of income where now you're going to make moves based on what makes you happier.
So your emotional wellness is a lot better. So while, the money thing may not be a huge impact, if you're to a threshold where they're able to make decisions. So like if Sarah's parents were able to make decisions on what makes them happy, which ultimately makes your life better, versus where your dad's at, where he's like taking these drugs in order to get himself into a situation to provide this level for his family. Like those two things to me are vastly different.
Yeah,
because,
but my dad was making quite a bit of money.
Right, that's what I'm saying. He could have also chosen not to. You guys would have been on a little bit lower status, but like the mental health level. But again, your dad's, if you're like a worker, if you're a worker and you're like, I want to work hard, I'm a hard worker.
Yeah.
Like that to him may not have even entered the picture.
And he has all kinds of trauma that led him to be the person that he was. So I can't make any judgments about that.
Right.
But it's interesting. You're at a place where you feel financially stable and it's allowing you to make decisions that make you happy. I've kind of decided that instead of changing my income level to a place where I can make decisions to make me happy, I'm trying to change my freedom level to a place where my income can be smaller, but my freedom is so much that I can just do whatever the fuck I want.
By the way, that sounds like a total like American like capitalist. Like,
does it?
What's your freedom level? Oh, I'm at a freedom level 10. Freedom level 10. Good Lord.
Jesus Christ, man. How are you even surviving in that free? Can you be that free?
Yeah. I thought it only went to 8.
Are you rock hard all day long?
It's just like, how free can someone be? I think every idea that starts, it like the basement level always sounds like insane, because you just think of like the end picture. You don't think of like how you're going to get there. It's like, I think the focus should be, does it make you happy? And if it makes you happy and you are still able to keep, like you said, your freedom level the same, I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer.
Well, this is why I feel like I can go after it, because I do feel free. I don't love my job. I've been vocal about that. But I have the potential to move into jobs that I like more. We talked earlier, I could change my situation in such a way that I might enjoy my job better. Yeah. And this podcast and the one I'm doing with Sarah, I love doing it. I will continue to do it and make no money.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about it. I'm making no money doing this right now. I couldn't sleep last night because I was so excited about talking to you today. So no, I love it. And since I'm willing to do it for free, why not try to get paid for it? That's how I genuinely feel about it. But I also am the type of person who I like to daydream. I like to live in that place where I think about. I'm not going to let it get me distracted, because one of the big things that kind of went into me feeling this empowered was finally fucking finishing college. I finished with my bachelor's degree. I realized what it was. I just chose to spend a lot of time reading and a lot of time thinking and a lot of time writing out those thoughts in a coherent way. And I got good at that. And then graduate school, by the time it came around, I was good at it. And I kind of talked to you earlier about the dumbing down of college. I think there is something to be said about this educational industrial complex that has been created, where we're just trying to generate revenue through selling college degrees, and they'll fucking give one to anybody who's willing to pay for it. Yeah. And so in order to make sure that they get that money, they lower the rigor, they lower the requirements. What's necessary in order to be competitive in college is lower now than I think it's ever been.
Do you think so? Or do you think
I think so.
I mean, I definitely think that they've they've definitely expanded the pool, right?
Yeah.
So like, obviously the people maybe like 20 years ago, like it was a lot harder to get into a college or whatever. And maybe that's something that we need to go back to. But like, even, I mean, to get into college, like the level of stuff that you kind of have to know, like if you go back like 50 years ago, like half the people that went to college wouldn't even made that level.
You're right.
You know? So while it does seem like it's dumbed down a little bit, I think it may be also that our expectations are raised on what we feel like society should know. Now, we should really be focusing on, where do we want society to be? Because if we're really saying, okay, we need society, we're going to make college a little bit more restrictive, but ultimately our society, we want people being creative. We want people producing things of value other than trinkets and little bullshit. Like, let's do that.
I completely agree.
I mean, I'm not like a big Andrew Yang, like here's your the universal income. I'm kind of behind that, but I also think that there should be a more focused effort on like what should we expect people to be like outputting, because we can do a whole lot of stuff in terms of like humanities and arts and being creative and stuff like that. But like some of that has to, doesn't make a lot of income, but that's why you're supplementing it with this universal income. And then therefore, I think overall humanity has a little bit better, understanding a little bit, it's more like a community type thing.
There's definitely something to that, what you just said. And this is why I appreciate talking to you so much, because you're able to articulate your thoughts in a way where, no, I totally agree. You're right. What the average college person was able to produce and was able, in terms of just like their level of thought 20 years ago, was held to a much lower standard than what we're holding people to today. I think also something that I do to myself often, my parents didn't go to college. So when I think of a college person, it's like, man, they must be fucking smart, man. And then when I get there and like I'm smarter than a lot of these people, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong? I should not be smarter than these people. But sometimes I hold myself to a standard that's unfair.
Yeah, like hold yourself to a standard, but that standard would be difficult for lots of people to meet.
But I don't feel like it should be, because I feel like I'm low. I have low. I need to work on my self-esteem.
Like in terms of self-esteem.
I need to work on my self-esteem.
I don't think I'm anywhere close to a genius. I know I'm above average, but not much. Yeah. And that's where I put myself. Six. If you put a percentile out, not 50, I'm not average, I'm 60. But here's the thing, there's so many jobs that can be learned if people would just be like patient and say, look, we're going to take the time, we're going to invest in the worker. My grandpa didn't go to college,
right?
But guess what? He was a damn good worker, and he constantly was learning stuff while he was working there. And when he left, they wanted him back because he had the experience over the years. It wasn't because he had a college degree or that he, knew everything about computers. He didn't. But guess what? He was a hard worker. He was willing to learn. Like, if those are the things that we can be teaching people, I feel like society's going to be a lot better for it.
And that, Jacob Stratton, is the segue into what you want to talk about. Because the challenging part about that is the system. We
tear it down. Tear the system down.
I think. Is that what you think?
No,
I don't think. I don't think we need to tear the system down and completely recreate it. But the world has changed so much. We've got to change a lot.
Honestly, there has to be some kind of 15-year, 20-year period where you say, in 20 years, this is where we want society to be. Society in 2040, this is where I want it to be. In order to do that, I know that it's going to displace, same thing with automation. Let's say we want our entire industry, every industry, fully automated 2040. If we said that, we would say, we know that impacts these people, and these people, because we're making the decision, we need to make sure that either they have jobs or we're taking care of them in some way, because that's really the only way to do it, is say blank slate starts in 2040.
Yeah.
We're going to take care of you, and this is the program, and this is how we're going to retrain the whatever American workforce, and it's going to be focused on these things.
I couldn't agree with you more. Can I take this to a crazy place? Are you comfortable going there?
Yep. Animal Farm.
No, I don't think. Well, I don't know. First of all, I don't know where we're going to go while people are running the show. I don't think we will really genuinely be able to make progress while humans are the ones really making all the big decisions.
The problem is people will never give up the power, because every person kind of craves control over their own life. And by saying we as a society are seceding our of these decisions to whatever, some kind of automation, you'll never get society to do that. And I'm not sure that we necessarily need to do that.
Right now, all we do is argue about what the issue is, and sometimes when we're at our best, we argue, what can we do about the issue? We're heading in a direction where the argument won't even be about what do we do about the issue. It will only be what is the issue, because we will have artificial intelligences and AI algorithms that are complex enough to where if we decide what we want to accomplish, it will be able to tell us what we need to do in order to accomplish it. Exactly what we need to do. Who will die, how it happens, and we'll have to have the conversation. What is our ultimate goal? What are we trying to achieve? And if people do genuinely come to a place where they believe the algorithm knows best, and dude, let me tell you, with these kids, that's the direction I think we're headed.
Yeah.
People will be able to accept, okay, the algorithm has told us if we want a society where everybody is happy and everybody is fairly represented, and we take the path where the least amount of pain has to happen, this is the pain we have to accept. I think we could get there.
I don't think so.
Okay, I don't want to hear. Speak to me now, Jacob. I don't want to say another word for the next hour.
I don't know, maybe the next hour, but it just, to me, I'm just thinking about people, like the psychology of people, not just seceding the power to a decision like that. There are questions that humans have debated for forever. One of them, I'm just off the top of my head, like abortion. You are not going to get those two separate factions to come together and say, I'm willing to let some autonomous machine make a decision on whether, because let's say it says, yeah, abortion's cool, it's fine, you should do it, it's going to make society better in the long run. The people on the other side are going to say, no way, that goes against either my religious beliefs, or I just don't think that that decision should be made by someone that, by a machine that can't even, give birth and understand the implications of things like that. Because I don't think we're there with AI, right? And so even on the opposite side, say, nope, abortion is should be illegal, and it's a detriment to society. At that level, the people on the side that would, want abortion would say, okay, no, we think that there are these benefits for society. And the reason why it's not a settled issue is because there are valid arguments on both sides. Let me repeat, valid arguments on both sides. I have an opinion on it, but I would not invalidate someone else's opinion on the issue. That's the problem we've come to as a society. We've gone so far and made every decision so far. It's like, yep, this is the right answer. That's the right answer. This is the right answer. This is the right answer. And now we're stuck with the hard questions. And they don't require a machine to do it. They require us to look inside ourselves as a society and say, yes, we understanding that these are the negative implications of the decision we make, because each side has negative implications on a specific topic. This is our decision as society. We will agree that this is the best route. We probably won't agree, and there'll still be 50% of the people that'll be extremely pissed, but they'll be a lot less pissed than a machine making that decision.
I agree with you. I don't think you disagree with me. I think that the thing that is separating us is you're being more pragmatic than I'm being. I'm not thinking that this is going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
You're thinking more about the timeline.
You're talking like 2100.
I'm talking, yes.
Versus
100 years.
2040. Yeah,
100 years in is no time.
It's no time in the scope of the universe.
You're thinking in the scope of your experience and your children's experience, because you're really thinking about what's going to impact your children because you're responsible for them. And I appreciate that. And I guess the only thing I can say is I'm sorry that I'm not considering it that way. Because it would benefit your children if I was, I think.
I mean, it doesn't have to do with benefiting children. That's the problem. Everyone, every single person has their own idea about
their own value. It's all about what you value.
If your values are different than my values, then guess what? It's not possible for us to reach a consensus. If you tell me that the second that a sperm gets into an egg, that is a baby, we will never agree. We'll never agree. And it doesn't matter that we don't have to agree. We can be civil to each other. We can talk to each other as human beings. We can respect that we have two different opinions on things and that we don't agree. I think that's really the problem that we have with society. Not to get off on this weird tangent that we happen to be on, but like I know my neighbors' names and I know a little bit about them. And the reason I moved to Indiana, other than like the lower income tax and the property, well, actually property taxes are higher, but they give you an exemption that makes it the same as Louisville. But like their income tax is lower, and guess what? That's where my family is, and we don't. So like we live in an area that is away from the city. Like we are close enough to the city where we can do things, but we're also far enough away that like there's not a lot of traffic, it's just kind of like these are our neighbors and like we know these people. We go to neighborhood functions and we, kind of know our neighbors. Like that's something I think that as a society we should maybe get back towards, instead of, let's say you're 18, your brain's not fully formed, you should absolutely know exactly what you want to do, which almost no one does. Put someone not in like a National Guard, but like a community guard. You are doing stuff within the community and building that community network, and you do that for 1 year or 2 years, whatever. And you do that, and then by the time you're 20, unless it's something where it's like a doctor, a teacher, something where you like there is a need, an urgent need to fill those positions, like you do this thing and you spend time. You spend time on yourself and your community, and you make that investment, and that builds community networks, and that builds it across the United States.
Those things exist. There's things like TFA, like Teach for America, that my buddy Brian was in and stuff like that. Yeah, and those things exist.
But I mean,
I think
like
you're talking about making mandatory.
Mandatory. Every person who's 18, unless you go into the Army or unless you go into some kind of field that
There's just
requires...
a bunch of choices. Those fields would be one of the choices that you had to do.
Yeah, and it'd be like, let's just say like teaching or medicine, right?
Yeah.
So those two fields, you know what that actually does to those fields? People who want to get a head start and who have initiative, who are generally thought of as kind of like the best people or the cream of the crop, are going to flock to those positions. If those are the priority positions, you're putting the best people, you're getting the best people for teaching positions or the best people for, medicine. Somebody's not going to go to school and get $250,000 in debt in a medical degree just to like do it for a couple of years and then bounce.
Right. Or maybe they do because they have to, because it's one of the pathways in which they can that they can choose in order to fulfill this requirement. But even if they only do it for a year or two, if you treat them well, some of them will stay, and then you have some of the best. So I definitely agree with that. Thinking about what this podcast is, just like to start it off, I think of it kind of like an alternative to social media. A better alternative. You say you don't participate in social media at all.
Yeah.
I'm trying to participate in the healthiest way possible. But some young people, like my kids, have chosen like, okay, if I don't have to make a decision between not interacting with social media and interacting with social media. I have to interact with social media. I have to. And I understand that perspective because they want to have interactions with their friends. We evolve to want to be in communion with other people. And if the only places that we can get that is the internet, that's where they're going to go. We're lucky because we don't have to. We can choose to spend time with each other. And some people choose to not have a big social media presence like you. But other people in our generation have allowed this transition that's taken place in culture with this social media thing to change who they are and change how they interact with other people. Do you avoid it because you feel like it's negative?
So probably the thing that started me not using social media, because I have Facebook, like it's still active. And occasionally I'm like, oh yeah, what was that picture of me where I was in Nacho Libre attire?
Yeah, I love that
picture. I showed my amigos in Mexico that I work with. And, I think it was one of those things where I thought, I tried as a New Year's resolution to not use the internet. I thought, oh my gosh, like how did information get... This was back in 2011. And I thought, how did we even get information? I remember specifically having to write a report in like 4th or 5th grade about otters. And I had an encyclopedia and it had like a paragraph about otters. I had to write a 2-page paper. I'm like, how the hell am I going to write more about otters than what's in the encyclopedia? And I just like, you know what? Other than work and school, I will not use the internet. And I could not do it. And the reason I couldn't do it is because I have a need to be right and to prove people that I know more than they do. or that I'm correct, and it's a terrible flaw in me as a person. But I would literally, someone would say something objectively wrong, and I'm like, "You're wrong," and they'd be like, "Prove it," and I'm like, "Shit, I can't use the internet. Like, how do I prove to this person that they're wrong?" And I was just like, "Yeah, okay, that's not going to work." After like a month, it was torture. Or I'd be like, "Oh, what's that song?" I just didn't have it in my fingertips. I'm so reliant on it. And so I was like, you know what? I'll just give up Facebook. I still use it. And if I need to talk to my friends, I can talk to them. I know I can. And so I just stopped using it. And I was just so less stressed. And I didn't feel the need to post or... Like, if I wanted to know what was going on in my friends' lives, I would call them or I would text them and say, "Hey, man, what's going on?" Or the next time I saw them, I would know what's going on. The problem I did find was someone would mention something and be like, "What? What happened?" And they'd be like, "Oh, you didn't see us on Facebook." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not on Facebook." Even now, I think Chad sent me like an invitation to
a thing.
like the past couple invitations to things of like, "Hey, Easton's, the baby shower," and then Easton's first birthday and stuff. He would be like, "Oh yeah, sorry, forgot you're not on Facebook." And I'm not saying that social media is negative, and I definitely think it can be healthy, especially within adults. Because adults have context. Kids these days, I watched, what was that Bo Burnham movie, 8th Grade? I watched that and I was like, oh my gosh, that is a horrifying life.
I haven't seen that. I need to watch it.
It's just like everything you do is documented. I was a terrible person. I'm slightly better than I was when I was in middle school and high school.
Yeah.
And if people saw that, I mean, it would be a disaster. Like no one would ever talk to me. Like, I cannot believe you thought like that was a good idea. I'm like, you're right. Like, I recognize it's a terrible idea. These kids, it's all going to be documented for them. And while it may be good for them to look back and be just horrified at the things that they did and know that there was personal growth.
Until culture changes and allows them to grow. Because that's the thing we're dealing with right now, is we're dealing with that shift. Is
people find stuff that happened, whatever, like 30, 40 years ago, and they go, whoa, that is not okay. And then I just know that that's going to happen. It's going to happen with every generation. There is, especially with the internet, I feel like there's the cultural change or the generational change happens a lot quicker. Because you can find like-minded people and people to amplify your own ideas, whether good or bad, very easily. Same thing with the rise of white supremacy. It's like there are people out there that hold these ideas. Whether you think that they hold them or not is one thing, but those people will amplify that message within their own selves and get people who maybe would not have said anything or been a part of that coalition, like they would all be kind of in there, right?
Confirmation bias, basically.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, this is totally fine that I think that there are two, black and white people shouldn't be able to marry, or like they should be in. It's like,
because I can find
1,000 other people to confirm that that's true, and I'm living in this bubble that says it's true.
Because I can find 1,000 other people who also think this.
I'm living in this bubble.
Yes.
That says it's true.
And at the same time that is happening, you and I are sitting here having a conversation about it, and who knows how many people will be able to listen to that conversation. So I think we're in a small transitionary phase, a short thing that may be 5 or 10 years, but I think we'll recover from that. That whole and honestly, if you listen, depending on whose podcast you're listening to, it seems like we're kind of on a trajectory to where you're just going to have to get over having privacy unless you're in a really privileged position. I can't remember who said it. It might have been Johan Hari who said it. Are you familiar with Johan Hari? No, you know who it was? It was Yuval Noah Harari. I get those two mixed up a lot. Yuval Noah Harari wrote Sapiens. I listened to Sapiens. It totally changed the way that I think about humans and how we became what we are. Yeah. Then I listened to Homo Deus, his second book, and it freaked me the fuck out.
Yeah.
And it very dramatically updated my perspective on a single, very narrow potential future.
Yeah, so it was like, Sapiens was like, here's everything that's happened up to now, and then Homo Deus was here, but like it could lead to X.
Well, basically, it's like based on that context, based on all of these things that I laid out that you can clearly see make sense to how we got to where we are now through an evolutionary perspective. Now that I've already laid out this entire premise to get you here, let's continue with that train of thought and apply that to how we view the future and what seems to be true. And in Homo Deus, he basically says, we got infotech right around the corner, all this massive collection of data that's taking place, and we've got biotech right around the corner, a similar thing where we're collecting all this data about our bodies. We're going to upgrade ourselves over the next 100 years and do something other than Homo sapien. He calls it Homo Deus. Upgraded, elevated human gods who will pretty much view normal Homo sapiens as like a lesser thing.
Yeah, like the way we look at like Neanderthals.
Yeah. And he thinks he says we need to be prepared for that way of thinking. So then he's written his next book, which is 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Yeah. If that seems to be the trajectory, if nobody takes ownership of this, let's realize we can take ownership of this. What should we be doing to make sure we get the best outcome?
Yeah.
And I haven't finished 21 Lessons for the 21st Century because I got to a point where I had been thinking so much for such a long time. I was reading all these books over summer break. And then it started to get to where I was like, okay, I'm about to be teaching again in a couple of weeks. I need to shift
down to
Yes. And so I haven't really finished that book. But
yeah, I mean, here's the other thing too, though. Like, I do feel at least some of those books like over amplify what they think is possible. Anything is possible given the resources and the time. Yeah, but guess what? If you look at anything from like the 90s, we should have flying cars, which is a terrible idea by now. And we can't even get autonomous vehicles to drive us without, the autonomous vehicles are fine now. It's just there's still a lot of resistance to it. People underestimate, one, how long humans live. Two, those people are making decisions, right? Yeah, sure, that's fine that whatever an 18-year-old would love to, I would too, don't get me wrong, would love to drive an autonomous vehicle and not ever have to drive again. You know how many people that are our age and above? That's a huge section of people, 70, 80% of people that just don't want to do that don't trust the AI that it's there yet. Now, once it happens, it's going to happen quickly. But I think there's a lot of overestimation on technology of like, we're going to be able to do all this stuff. Yeah, maybe. I just feel like a lot of times we're saying, okay, this is something that's possible. Yeah, given either unlimited resources or we're actually focusing the time. You know how many things that like just the United States of America is focused on? There's other countries that are focused on other things. I just don't think that it's very optimistic on where we're going to be. Now, when it happens, it's going to happen quick. I think when we get at least 20 years down the road, I think it's going to be like, oh yeah, it's probably 50-50 where people are like, yeah, I think it's fine to use autonomous vehicles. A lot of the older people, either they want to still drive or
you think 20 years before autonomous vehicles?
Yeah.
I think 5.
And that's the thing, like, it's constantly been like, hey, we need to get this out there, we need to get this out there. Here's the problem. People freak out. Humans are dumb. Humans are really dumb. They freaked out because somebody jaywalked in a poorly lit area and got hit by an autonomous vehicle. Okay, 1, was that the car's fault? 2, that right there was a huge setback for autonomous vehicles. You know how many people freaking get killed by other humans because we're dumb and we're not perfect? Tons. The number of people who would die, I guarantee you right now with the current level of technology for cars, would be less than how many humans kill.
Oh, for sure.
We won't jump in there until it's perfect, air quotes.
I think that there is a small group of people who were freaked out by that instance that you just gave. I think that small group of people seems louder than it really is because of the internet, and most people are ready for it.
I'm talking about people I've talked to in person.
Really? About autonomous vehicles? It freaks them out?
Every person that I've talked to that's over the age of 30, so my age or older, does not want autonomous vehicles. Not that they don't want autonomous vehicles, I'm sorry. That they would prefer to drive versus a machine, and it's because of control. They control the vehicle. They know what they can do. But guess what? There are so many benefits to it. It's like, all right, you're 70 years old and you need to get to your doctor's appointment. You don't have to rely on some other person. You just literally, it's like Uber. Boom, boom, boom. Got the car. You would probably buy the car, but you get the car, you get in it, and it drives you to where you need to go. Those things can be set up for handicap accessible or, people that are older, geriatric community, and boom, sets it up. Boom, you get in there, car drives you to your appointment, you get out, you go in, you come back out, you drive home. Like, you have so much more freedom.
Oh yeah, I'm way behind you.
I'm pro.
I'm
autonomous
super
vehicles.
pro autonomous vehicles.
I just think that maybe we overestimate
how long it'll take to get them.
Well, it's just when people are going to feel comfortable using them in mass quantity to where it is at least comparable. Because as soon as you get to it being a comparable price as vehicles that are where you have to, automatic or manual transmission, or even fueled by gas. Even think beyond autonomous vehicles. Electric vehicles should be no problem, right? Common sense. Mm-hmm. Everyone use that. We don't have to use fuel. We don't have to, promote whatever, add to climate change, whatever. Well, guess what? It's still not here, and that should be way farther along than, we have Tesla. And they're starting to get more stations and stuff, but it's still expensive. It's only accessible to a small group of people. Until it can get that mass production of people buying those things, it's not going to flip.
Our experience is unique because of this transitionary thing that's happening where we're in the middle of this technological revolution. And I remember as being in a middle school or maybe elementary school, learning about the Industrial Revolution and thinking that happened. Now we're beyond that. We're in the other new thing. Nothing's going to change now.
Yeah.
Why did I think that?
Yeah.
I don't understand. You think we were just kids? We just couldn't understand?
Your big picture ideas and concepts, you just don't grasp them. When you're young, you're like, that'll never happen. Yeah. What could possibly happen again? And then you're like, oh, okay, computer. But then the computer was still slow, and you'd be like, and then somebody'd be on the phone, and you'd hear half of their conversation, or you'd be on the internet, and it would be like, chink, dink, 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 and you're like waiting for that page to load after 5 minutes, and someone picks up the phone. You're like, damn it! Like, come on! And so,
Let's try to look at boobies.
yeah, I mean, like, naked women search. Jake, why did you search naked women? Well, I was doing a project for school
On anatomy.
On anatomy, totally not an actual.
I remember
thing
my
that-
dad. He caught me. I was looking up pictures of Brooke Burke. Are you familiar with who that is?
Yes, I am.
I don't know why she's famous. I just know when I was like 13, she was hot.
Yeah,
And if you looked hard enough, you could find pictures of her boobies.
I remember she was on some kind of like network. They was like vacation destination,
she posed naked, apparently.
and there would be like one boob out of the entire like hour show, and you just like sit there and wait for like a blurry boob. That's literally the dedication and focus of a 12-year-old. I think I typed in like Sable. I remember from like wrestling. I remember that it's like she apparently was naked, and I was like, Sable boob. I guess like she only exposed one boob, like it was an accident.
That's hilarious. Now I remember my dad approaching me about it, and I remember the main message that I took away from it was he caught
Be
me
more
looking
discreet.
at boobs. Be a little bit more discreet, but mostly you're looking at a high caliber of chick. Brooke
okay.
is hot. I agree.
Yeah.
You know what? If you're checking her out, I think you want to know the God's honest truth about it. I think my dad was relieved that I was into chicks. Do you remember when you, me, Chris Berry, that little tiny girl that Chris was hanging out with all the time,
Kristen.
drove to that fucking graveyard?
I knew you were gonna say that. Not that those. A lot of those stories are really funny because remember the second time we did it with a larger group of people.
Yeah.
And so we go to, I think it's E-Town, near E-Town,
Yeah.
Elizabethtown, and
Well, wait, let me tell the story. It's because people haven't heard it. We drove to this graveyard. We get there. It's a graveyard. I'm terrified. And these rednecks show up, and we have to, like, bail. And then after we bail, we get pulled over by some cops. So we're already all freaking out. A single cop. We were
at
driving
the West
through
Point.
West Point, and this
They have a speed trap.
stupid girl was
Yeah.
speeding through this. And
Wait, was it really like that's the thing? It was like 55 and then it cuts down to 35.
Yeah.
And literally I remember it was Chris or myself said, "Hey, you should probably slow."
yeah,
And
it was quick.
the cop turned his lights on. We're like, "Well, it's too late now."
I just remember he was looking in the back with all his lights. He sees a bunch of kids. We weren't doing anything wrong, but I just remember he was just like, "You guys got anything back there you're not supposed to have?" And then you just kind of leaned forward and just picked up your
No.
soda pop and just went slurp, slurped a little slurp right off of it. And I was just like, "Oh my gosh!"
One, I'm like pretty sure that this is one of those things I think about. Like, this could have been a huge like changing point in my life because I am like pretty sure he had like his gun drawn.
Really?
I remember that.
Oh gosh!
I remember him asking us to put our hands like
Yes.
where we could see him.
Yes, and then you
And
reached
then
down
and then he was like, put your hands in there. And then I just like shot my hands down and grabbed my bowler ball and shot it back up. And he like turned. I remember him turning the gun on me. I was like, just. And then
God, I
you
hope
know
that's not actually what happened, but I hope it is. At the same
that's
time.
how I remember it in my
Yeah.
head. And then he was like, "Is there alcohol in there?" I'm like, "No, it's Mountain Dew." And he's like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah." Do you like? That was the thing. I mean, she probably literally pulled over into the worst possible spot too. It
Yeah.
was like an abandoned gas station on the side of the road. It was terrifying. Remember the second? You were there the second time we went out there, and because I think Chris, he may have was that when he threw that stick against your leg?
Yes.
It was like super creepy, and he just like launched a stick.
He knew I
against
was
your
afraid. I was afraid of anything. Like we were two things. It was dark. It was middle of the night. We were in a graveyard. That had me kind of freaked
I
out.
can't explain how pitch black it was.
It was so black. And because we weren't anywhere near a city, like we were out like kind of in the country.
It literally went from like it was like a road, lane both ways to a single lane to gravel road.
Yeah.
And then it dead ends and circles. And there's really there's a couple, there's trees all around, but there's like a couple main trees.
Yeah.
And then there's all these little tiny tombstones that are like 1860, 1880.
Which was actually really cool. And if we'd gone during the day, I probably could have really appreciated it. But I was afraid of being there. We weren't supposed to be there. That had me elevated.
That was definitely true.
And I wasn't afraid of ghosts. I don't believe in ghosts. Chris would like to think I was scared of ghosts. And he likes to pick on me about it. I was more afraid of... It was dark. Were there animals? I didn't want to get bitten by even like something small, like anything. I just didn't want to have. So he threw that stick, and yes, it frightened me, and so I ran.
You were walking in front of him, and I remember he just kind of tossed it, and it brushed your leg. Okay, the one thing that I do remember is that I don't remember his name. I think it was Chris also, but
Boudry.
Boudry,
yeah, Leslie. Wow,
and Leslie.
Now so I've got to share this with them because they can connect.
So literally, I just remember. You just said like, oh, these guys asked us to leave. No, two like pickup trucks with some good old boys.
Yes.
With all like 22s sitting across their lap. We're sitting there like, we got your license plates. Don't ever come back here.
Because we weren't supposed to be there.
We weren't supposed to be there. That's fair. They didn't know who we were, what we were doing there. That's fine. But the funny part was like they were coming down the road and freaking Chris Boudry takes off and dives through this open window and just leaves Leslie like, straight in there. And like he's like in the back seat. I'm sure in his head he's thinking like, if they kill everybody, like I'll be there to tell the story. But like, I'm sure Leslie felt like great that he just like booked it and dove through that window. It made me laugh so hard. Every time I think about it.
That's hilarious.
God, I love that story.
We also met Leslie Boudry. I don't remember I think it was Leslie Davis.
Leslie Davis, yeah.
She was in the same English class that we met in. I sat behind her and made her uncomfortable.
You're right. I remember that. I remember that class.
Winnie. Hey, there's my puppy.
Oh, Winnie.
This is a perfect chance to wrap this up. That's if you can hear that. That's the sound of my lovely dog Winifred.
Say, wrap that shit up, B.
Jake. It was amazing opportunity to get to talk to you. Thank you so much for making the time to come over here and sit down and talk to me. We need to do this again.
Oh, thanks, Mitch. Love you.
Love you too. All right, so that is the Jake Stratton compilation podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. His wife was also an amazing guest. Her podcast is going to be coming out soon as well. And I'm going to try to get them on together as a Just Friends couples now that I've got 4 microphones. So as always, guys, if you're listening to the podcast and you're enjoying it, please share it. I would love it if the community would grow. Also, if you're not already following us on Facebook, you need to check out the Facebook page and also the new Facebook group, which is a private community of people who are listening to Just Friends podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or anywhere else, please rate the show and leave us a review if you don't mind. It really does help us to increase our visibility on there. We got people listening in like Canada and India and Mexico and Brazil, and I'm not sure exactly who those people are, but those people are awesome. And also, as always, if you're interested in being on the show, just reach out to me, man. I would really, really love to have you on. And I'm going to continue to do my due diligence by reaching out to you guys as well. So I love you all. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.